Hello, hi, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another video on this channel. I'm very excited for this video. We are going to be reading my library books and whether or not I can finish them on time before the due date. I have a bad habit of checking out my library books and returning them late, or I would return them on time but did not even touch the book. So it's very rare that I finish a library book and actually return it before the due date. I feel like in order to hold myself accountable to finish the library books and return them before the due date, I thought documenting all this would help me with my accountability. So in this video, we are going to be reading two of my library books. Let's get them. So here are my two library books that we need to complete in this video. The first one is The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. And according to my little receipt from the library, this is due February 27th. Today's February 15th, so we have quite a lot of time to finish this book. The second book is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This is Freya's book club pick for the month of February on Fable. I feel like I have to finish this before February, but I think if I remember correctly, on the Fable app, I think she set it for March 2nd. According to the library, this book is due March 4th. So because I do want to participate in Freya's book club and I want to finish the book before we get onto our March book club pick. So of the two books that we have here, although I want to read The Kiss of Deception first because I want to finish this in time for Freya's book club, it only makes sense to read The Poet Empress by Shen Tao first because it is due first, and this whole video is to finish my library books on time. So we are going to start with The Poet Empress by Shen Tao, and I believe I read the synopsis for this book in my anticipated new releases of 2026 video, so I am not going to read the synopsis again. So we're going to go into this semi-blind. The only thing I can remember about this book is that the magic system is poetry, and I believe our female main character is gonna be a concubine for the prince, and she's going to learn the poetry magic in secret because during this time women were not allowed to read, let alone read poetry. Honestly, yeah, I really don't know what this is about. So we're going to start with The Poet Empress, and I will check in with you all once I have a reading update. Good morning. It's been a week and a day since I last checked in. Let's do a reading and book update. I am currently reading still The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. I am on page 162 out of 388, so I'm not even halfway through the book yet. So we follow Wei, who is our female protagonist in this book, and she lives in a village with her family, and during this era the famine is taking over, and so because of famine we start off seeing Wei and her family burying her baby sister. I believe she's the eldest in her family, and one day her little brother Bao wants to go into the city to celebrate the new year because it was rumored that one of the princes from the kingdom would grant blessings to the city, and you can grab some of the blessings that they pretty much, I guess, not distribute, but cast, I guess you can say. So Wei and her little brother goes into the city, and to her surprise, a prince actually does come into the city to grant a blessing to the city. So he's a prince who has the power guo, which is fruit. So he pretty much grants a lot of blessings of fruits growing everywhere. There was a catch to this. The prince came in because the kingdom is looking for concubines for the crown prince Terran. Now Terran's power is Dao, which is knife or sword. And so that it's more of like a military power. Because of the famine, Wei becomes desperate. She doesn't want to lose any more of her family members. She wants her little brother to go to school, live a good life, and her whole family to live a good life. So she decides to be part of the concubine, tries to be part of the concubine. So she actually gets chosen to be one of the concubines. Initially, it was to be as a joke, to be made fun of, and just to have the crown prince laugh, mainly because most of these concubines are from the city or have some sort of status. Let's talk about the magic system in this book. So those who are literomancers can cast spells or blessings is what they call it, and it's through poems. You need to be able to read and write and put emotion in those poems for it to be casted as a blessing. During this era, women were not allowed to read, let alone write a poem. So in order to take down the cruel crown prince, Taryn, she learns to read and write to become a literomancer. I'm not sure exactly if she wants to become a literomancer, but she wants to write a poem to take down the crown prince. Women were not allowed to read and write, so she is doing this in secret. I guess that's pretty much what it's about. So my thoughts on this book is that at the beginning, I wasn't really interested in the story until the 30% mark. So past 100 pages, I think it was around 120 pages, I started getting interested in the story. Also, I wasn't able to connect with any of the characters, especially since this is written in first person. I thought I would be able to connect to at least the female protagonist, but I felt further away from her. I didn't feel like I was in her position because it is written as first person. I thought it would be much easier to be put in that situation, but instead I felt disconnected. What got me interested at the 30% mark was actually the history between the princes in the kingdom. So I didn't really talk too much about the princes. So each of the princes have a power. The eldest brother is Amaro, and his power is Lu, which is road. So he can carve roads and paths, and it's to build relationships, transportation between cities. You would assume he would be the crown prince, but it is our second eldest son, Taryn, who is the crown prince. He is this cruel, cold-blooded prince, and he has no mercy. He tortures, punishes anything and anyone. So he is known to be cruel, and so far I am really not liking this character. The few books that I did read that has like quote-unquote a cruel prince, it was more so a stoic or cold persona. He is actually a cruel person and tortures even his concubines. So we see Maro and Taryn's childhood, and they were inseparable as children, but as they got older, they became enemies. And I'm not gonna go dive into that too much. That is what got me into this story. I just deviated a bit. There are 3 other princes. The third prince is Isan, and he is the one that went into the city and cast blessings of fruits to that city. And the fourth one is, I don't remember his name, but I think his power is Feng, which is wind. So they don't really talk too much about him in this one. And the fifth prince is, I think his name is Rui, or maybe that was the fourth prince. But the fifth prince is just a baby, so he has no power yet. So that's where I am in the book. Another thing I want to mention is that I love the attention to detail in this book. So punctuation marks such as period, exclamation points, and question marks, they have a little star or a sparkle, which I think is very cute. From far, I'll insert a picture here, but if you look from far, it just looks like a circle, but when you look closely, it is a star, which is really cute. I don't know if other books do that, but this is the first time I've noticed that, so maybe other books do have it, but I really appreciate the attention to detail. So that is where we are in this book. Today is February 24th, and I have 3 more days to finishing this book, which I think it's doable. So I'm gonna try to get a huge chunk of it done today so that tomorrow I could finish it off and return it to the library. But I have 3 days left, so fingers crossed I can finish this in time. That is pretty much the whole point of this video. I will get a huge chunk in today, hopefully, and I will check in with you all when I have another reading update. it's the next day. It is 11:57 a.m. I am making my second caffeinated drink of the day. I wanted to check in with you all for a quick reading updates. We have read a humongous chunk last night. We are at the last 100-page mark now. I stayed up very late last night to get to this point, and it was so good. Now I can see the hype in this book. I feel so conflicted with how I feel about the characters. At first, I mentioned that I did not like Taryn, who is the crown prince, who is known to be cruel and a tyrant. And after seeing his backstory and his past, where we see his timeline from being a child, from actually being born to where he is now, I don't even know how I feel anymore. I feel like I have a soft spot for him now. I don't know, like maybe it'll flip-flop and then I will hate him in the end. We'll see how this goes. For now, I feel very conflicted with how I feel with these characters. My initial feeling of these characters were that I didn't really feel connected to any of them, and none of them really hit me in any way. But after seeing the backstory of the brothers, Morrow and Taryn, I'm having some conflicting thoughts. I have a soft spot for Taryn at the moment, and I also have a soft spot for Morrow. I believe I mentioned this in my previous clip where I mentioned the first person writing style in this book. At first, I didn't feel like it really helped me get into Wei's position. So we follow our female main protagonist, and it is written in first person, and for some reason I just couldn't get into Wei's character. But as the story progressed, I did not mind the first person any longer. And because the backstory where we see Morrow and Taryn's past, it's written in third person, I think that helped me get into the story more. So I wonder if I'm a third person POV in terms of fantasy books, or if I'm a first person. I'm not sure yet, but it seems to me that with my experience with this book, I think I would have preferred it in third person. But at this point, at the last 100-page mark, even at the halfway point of this book, I did not seem to mind the first person writing anymore. So I'll hop back on once I have another update, maybe within the last 100 pages or when I finish this book. Hi, it is after work. It is February 26th, and I am happy to announce that I have finished The Poet Empress. This book is due February 27th, and I finished it in the nick of time. Let's talk about it a little bit before we jump into our next book. So that's one book down in this little challenge of if I can finish my library books before the due date. I'm happy about that. I'm going to talk about this in my February wrap up. And for now, I just want to mention that I really enjoyed this book. Although it was quite slow for me in the beginning and I wasn't really truly invested in the story until maybe more than halfway through the book, but the ending was very satisfying. Even the last 40%, I would say, that changed my rating, because by the 50% mark, I kind of had an idea of where I was gonna rate this book, but after reading the entirety of this book, it did change my thoughts on it. As of today, February 26th, I am going to rate this a 4 stars. I'm debating between a 4 or a 4.5 stars, but I'm leaning towards a 4 stars because of the beginning. I just wasn't really into the story, and at one point, I felt like I was going to fall into a reading slump because I just wasn't really picking up this book. Because of that, maybe I'll just give it a 4 stars, and I will provide the rest of my review on this book in my February wrap up. So one book down in this little challenge, that is The Poet Empress, and I will return this tomorrow. Because it is February 26th, the next book we are going to read is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I will be completely honest, right now I have been reading many fantasy novels back to back, and they're more of the heavier fantasy novels. I don't know if I want to read a fantasy novel at this moment, and I kind of want to read something lighthearted because I have read 2 pretty heavy fantasy so far, and I'm going into another fantasy book. I don't know if this is going to be dark, but to read another fantasy while I just went through pretty heavy fantasy novel with pretty heavy elements in some of them. I'm kind of worried that I might fall into a reading slump with The Kiss of Deception. But because this is due March 4th, I really need to get to this. I don't know if this is going to be a heavy fantasy. I think this is supposed to be a romantasy, so that might make it better. It seems to me that this is YA as well because I think she is 17, our female main protagonist in this. Whereas the Poet Empress and Jade War were following... Oh wait, actually no, the Poet Empress was also pretty young. The Poet Empress, I think, is classified as an adult fantasy, even though we are following our female main protagonist to be of 16 years of age. It did read more adult, and also it has some trigger warnings in it. So I'll give my review of the Poet Empress. I don't know why I jumped back to the Poet Empress again, but The Kiss of Deception. I really hope it's not too heavy, and I hope that because I think this is a romantasy, that's going to help with all the heavier fantasies that I've read. So hopefully it won't be too bad. But if I feel like I'm going to fall into a reading slump because I've been reading fantasy back to back so far, I will supplement this reading with First Time Caller by B.K. Borson. So a more lighthearted romance novel. But this video won't center around a First Time Caller. So we're really going to still focus on The Kiss of Deception. So we are going to jump right into this novel today because I have 6 days left to finish this book. Wish me luck. I don't know if I can do this. And it is longer too. So hopefully it reads pretty quick and that I don't fall into a slump. We'll read The Kiss of Deception in a bit because I am going to make dinner. So I'm gonna go make dinner and then we'll get to reading. Good morning. I filmed a clip of a reading update yesterday, March 2nd, and I realized that as I continued reading the book, I said a lot of spoilery things. So I'm going to try filming this again and give you an update on my reading updates. We are currently reading The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I am definitely more than halfway through the book. I would say I can finish this maybe in the next day, I think, or hopefully I can try to finish it today because today's March 3rd and this book is due March 4th. I'm really pushing it to the last minute for this book. I would say that this book is just taking me a long time to read. I'm not sure if it's because I am in the mood to read another genre. I've been reading fantasies back to back. Not really. I've read 2 fantasy books before reading The Kiss of Deception, so maybe it's time to switch it up a little bit. At the same time, I feel like this was a perfect palate cleanser for the fantasies that I have been reading. So this is giving more of a YA romantasy compared to what I have been reading prior to this. So I was reading more adult fantasy and not really in the romance. I'm kind of thinking whether the Poet Empress was a romantasy, but at the same time, I didn't really feel the romance in it. There is not really a romance in there. And then prior to that was Jade War, and that is purely in urban fantasy. Let's talk about The Kiss of Deception. So we are following the Princess of Morrigan, and she is Princess Leia. She's actually known as Arabella, and actually her name is really long. She does not want to be in an arranged marriage, and she decides to run away to a small village, Terravin. Actually, I'm gonna open the map. So there is a map, but because there's a big sticker right in the middle with the library and its barcode. I'm going to put a picture of the map so that we can all look at it together. Right here, we see the Kingdom of Morgan, and this is where our main female protagonist resides in Civicum, and she wants to run away with one of her friends, and her friend Pauline works at the kingdom with her. I feel like she's maybe a maid. That's what I was getting while I was reading this book. So Pauline and Princess Leia decides to run away to a small village called Terravin and pretty much live an ordinary life. In the beginning, we can already tell that not only is she getting prepared for her wedding, she's also trying to plan her escape. So ultimately, within the first chapter, Princess Leia and Pauline manages to escape the Kingdom of Morgan. Now, they are in Terravin. I believe Pauline grew up in Terravin by her aunt. I think that's why they decided to go to Terravin, and they become tavern maids for Pauline's aunt. Now in comes our two main male protagonists. They come in together into the tavern, and the first one goes by the name Caden and the other one Kaif. We don't know which one is which, but all we know is that one of them is the Prince of Dalbrick, who is the one that was supposed to be married to Princess Leia, and she despises the fact that the Prince of Dalbrick allowed his father to put him in an arranged marriage with Princess Leia. I believe it's to make an alliance between the two kingdoms. And the other one is an assassin hired by someone in the kingdom of Venda, and he is tasked to assassinate the princess. This is written in multiple POV, but mainly we are following Princess Leia, and we get chapters of Caden, Kaif, the assassin, and the prince. So we're kind of guessing who is who. So initially, my thoughts of who the assassin was and who the prince was not right. So I think that's the best way to say it without spoiling anything, unless you have already read this book. But as I continued reading past the halfway point, I realized that I could have been wrong. And so when the reveal came at around this point, I would say, I was not that surprised. I didn't feel like it was a big plot twist because I had second thoughts of who they were. Although I really did enjoy that little plot twist because initially I thought the prince was this person and the assassin was this person. But because I kind of switched it last minute or in the last couple of pages before the reveal, it wasn't as surprising, but I can see how it can be very plot twisty there. It's starting to get really interesting. I feel like this is a very easy read, and again, this is more of like a palate cleanser in terms of the fantasies that I've been reading. I enjoy this little romantasy. So this is a trilogy, and so far as I am nearing the end of this book, I think I'm going to continue on with the series. It really depends on how the ending goes. I haven't heard specifically of this trilogy, but I have heard of Mary E. Pearson because she also wrote the duology. She also wrote the Dance of Thieves duology. So I did want to read that long ago. I'm glad that I didn't jump into the Dance of Thieves duology yet because people say to read the Remnant Chronicles trilogy first before reading the Dance of Thieves. However, I'm not sure if you could just read the Dance of Thieves duology before reading the Remnant Chronicles. So I'm glad that this was Freya's February book club pick of the month. I'm enjoying this. This is kind of like a nice little ride that I'm on. I'm not really using my brain too much. It's really easy to read and it's getting interesting. That is my reading update on this. And because today's March 3rd, I really have to finish this by March 4th, which is tomorrow. We'll see if I can finish this book. That is the whole point of this video, to see whether I can finish all my library books before their respective due dates. We really have to lock in and finish this. I think it's doable. So I'm going to alternate between reading the physical copy and listening to it as an audiobook. I feel like that really helps with finishing a book for me because cooking and washing the dishes takes up a lot of my time, whereas I could have been reading. I'm going to make breakfast. It is 8:08. I have about 52 minutes before work. I'll probably listen to the audiobook while eating, and hopefully I can get a really good chunk of this done before work. I will catch up with you all once I complete this book or if I have another reading update. Good morning. It is March 4th and I have a reading update. I am happy to say that I have finished The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson last night at around 1:30 a.m. So I am so exhausted today, and I have work in about 20 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. I cannot see the time. I have finished The Kiss of Deception, so that means I have successfully completed the challenge of whether or not I can finish my library books before the due date. I am very proud of myself with this because I usually don't finish library books, and either I just hold it past its due date so that I can finish it, or I would just return it and never read it again because I was in the middle of it. Or I just never start the book. I mean, I guess not starting the book is better than reading it halfway, in my opinion. So if I didn't start the book and return it, that's fine. But if I was in the middle of the book and I didn't finish it, but I had to return it because it was due, I think that might have been the second worst option, rather than keeping it past its due date, because you would want others to read the books as well. So I am guilty of holding it past its due date. So that is why, to hold myself accountable to finishing my library books, I decided to make this video. We'll see if this is going to be a series. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it a series. I am pretty good at just pushing back my hold, so if it's ready for pickup, I would just cancel it and put it on hold again because it's not the time for me to read it at the moment, and I have a lot of other books to get to. Today is March 4th. It is due today, and because technically it is due by the end of today, but I just wanted to finish this yesterday. Well, technically I finished it March 4th at 1:30 a.m. I am exhausted, which is why I have eye patches here, and I just feel like it's kind of odd to film in this kind of angle because usually I reserve these kind of angles or even pull out my tripod when I am doing a sit-down video or if I'm doing an intro to a video, maybe an ending. So I guess this is okay. Now back to talking about the Kiss of Deception. I feel like I'm jumping all over the place. Let's give my, I don't know if I want to give you my thoughts here or in my, actually let's give my thoughts here. Honestly, while I was reading it, because that I knew this was due in 6 days and there's 489 pages including the acknowledgements, that's quite a long read for me. To finish it within a week, I think that was good. I don't think I picked it up too many times. To talk about the Kiss of Deception, I don't think I've described it too well in the last clip, so let me try to describe it better. In this book, we follow Princess Leia, and she is in this political arranged marriage so that the two kingdoms can unite. I won't dive into the kingdoms again, bringing up the map and everything. So when we start the book, she is in an arranged marriage with the Prince of Dalbrick. She is from the kingdom of Morrigan, and they are in an arranged marriage to form an alliance. And there's a third kingdom, Venda, and they just want to take over the world. So I believe that's pretty much the politics around it. I don't know too much about it. I feel like that's what I got from reading this book. And so at the start of the book, she's getting ready for her marriage, and she decides that she doesn't want to be part of this, and she doesn't really want to abide to all these old traditions, especially the one with the arranged marriage. What does she do? She decides to escape and run to a small village in Terravin. She has her maid or maybe a servant or lady in waiting, and she is her friend. Her name is Pauline, and they decide to escape to Terravin, and this is, I believe, the city that Pauline grew up in. They decide to work at this tavern that Pauline's aunt owns and become a tavern maid. In comes our two main male protagonists. The first is the Prince of Dalbrick, and he's quite bitter about the fact that she ran away from the wedding, not because that she ran away from him, but that he wanted to be the one to escape the arranged marriage. And the second male protagonist, he is the assassin that was hired from the kingdom of Venda. I believe he's also from the kingdom of Venda. His assignment is to assassinate the princess. They both go to the village of Terravin to find Princess Leia, and Princess Leia sees these two gorgeous men come into the tavern one day, and it just so happens to be the prince and the assassin. However, she does not know their identity. That's how the story unfolds. Now let's talk about my thoughts on this book. I didn't feel too invested in the politics in this one. Maybe it's because I feel like this book is just really setting up the story with our female main character and seeing these two gorgeous men. I feel like we were more focused on the characters rather than the politics of this book, or maybe I just literally skipped all the politics or was not totally there while reading the politics on this. I feel like when I got to near the end of the book, I was able to see that there was gonna be more that's going to happen. It was a great way to open up more things to happen in the second and the third book. This one was more so focusing on the quote-unquote romance rather than the fantasy elements of it. They have little excerpts, I would say, of a story or a page from a book the testaments and also a song. It's interesting, but at the same time, it kind of throws me off a little bit while I'm reading. At first, when I was reading it, I wasn't really too fond of those moments. I feel like it was throwing me off the reading pace that I was at. As you get deeper into the story, you can see how they kind of connect. I mean, it's supposed to connect anyway. It didn't bother me as much as I got near the end of the book. So this is a love triangle. I don't mind love triangles, but I don't think I rooted for anybody. Actually, I did. So before I tell you who I was rooting for, I do want to explain the structure of the story. So in my last clip, I mentioned that this story is written in multiple POVs. So we get our female main character. She's mainly who we are following. And then we get little POVs here and there from the prince, the assassin, and 2 names. I didn't realize that it might have been a spoiler that Caden could be the prince or the assassin and Kaif is the one remaining. But I feel like if you have read the back of the book, I think maybe automatically you would assume one is the prince and the other one is the assassin. However, if you just go into this book blind, I can see why that would have been a bit of a spoiler. So instead of explicitly saying who I thought is who, all I'm going to say is that initially I assumed one way. And as I was giving my thoughts in my last clip, I switched it. And then when we got to the reveal of who was who, I wasn't surprised because I already switched it by that point. It felt very weird because you went through this book thinking Caden was this person, but let's say midpoint you switch it, and so it was hard for me to grasp that. And then it wasn't even that long before the reveal came, and although I wasn't surprised, but it felt very odd to see them a different way. That's all I'm gonna say. I thought Mary E. Pearson did a really great job on that because for the longest time I thought Caden and Kaif were this person and this person, but because I was giving my thoughts in my last clip, I started doubting myself a bit. I thought that was a really interesting take. I really enjoyed that part of the book. In terms of the love triangle, in the initial stage, I did root for Kaif. After finishing this book, I don't think I'm rooting for anybody at the moment. At the same time, with a love triangle, I'm indifferent about a love triangle. So I used to watch a lot of K-dramas when I was younger, and a lot of the older Korean dramas had a lot of love triangles. I don't have a strong dislike towards love triangles, but I also don't seek it. So I'm curious to see how it will turn out. I think I saw a bit of a spoiler online, so I really hope that isn't the case. When I was in the middle of the book, I wasn't sure if I was going to continue with the series. It wasn't really grasping my attention, but near the end, it started getting better. I would say maybe in the last 50 pages, it started getting really good. For the most part, I didn't really feel too invested in the story, so I was okay with not continuing with the series. But because of the last 50 pages, I'm curious to see how it's going to unfold. And also because I do want to read the Dance of Thieves duology. So they say to read this trilogy first before reading the Dance of Thieves duology. After the end of the book, I decided to continue on with the series. So this is going to be one of the books that I do want to continue on with the series. In terms of the politics, in terms of the world building, I think it was okay. It wasn't really a big deep dive into it, but then again, it is the first book, so maybe it would show that world building and more of the politics in the second book. So that was my final thoughts on The Kiss of Deception. I rated this a 3.75 stars, which is not bad, a 75%, which is really good still, especially since it took me a while to get into this book too. But because it started getting more interesting near the end, I'm curious to see what the second book and the third book offers. So to give you my thoughts on this little challenge, I really do enjoy doing this little challenge. Maybe I can make it a series. I'm not too sure. It depends on how many library books I end up checking out, so we'll see. And I felt like making this video really held me accountable to finishing my library books on time. So if I catch myself not finishing my library books on time, I think I need to make this video again. I think this was a very effective video in terms of me finishing my library books. If I catch myself not finishing my library books on time, you will see another one of these videos. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!